17. Duck, duck, goose. Okay, Arya blew her long bangs out of her eyes. In this scene, you have to wear this colander on your head and talk a lot about a baby we don't have. Noel frowned and brought his thumb to his pink brow-shaped lips. Why do I have to wear a colander on my head, Finland? Because, Arya answered, it's an absurdist play. It's supposed to be, like, absurd. Gotcha, Noel grinned. It was Friday morning and they were sitting on desks in the English class. After yesterday's Waiting for Godot's disaster, Ezra's next assignment had been for them to break up into groups and write their own existentialist plays. Existentialist was another way of saying silly and out there. And if anyone could do silly and out there, it was Arya. I know something really absurd we could do, Noel said. We could have this character drive a navigator and, after a couple of beers, crash it into his duck pond. But he's, fallen asleep at the wheel, so he doesn't notice he's in the duck pond until the next day. There could be ducks in the navigator. Arya frowned. How could we stage all that? It sounds impossible. I don't know, Noel shrugged. But this happened to me last year, and it was really absurd and awesome. Arya sighed. She hadn't exactly chosen Noel to be her partner because she thought he'd be a good co-writer. She looked around for Ezra, but he unfortunately wasn't watching them in fitful jealousy. How about if we make one of the characters think he's a duck, she suggested. He could randomly quack. Sure, Noel wrote down that on a piece of lined paper with a gnawed up pencil. Hey, maybe we could shoot this with my dad's Canon DV camera and have this as movie instead of a boring play. Arya paused. Actually, that would be kind of cool. Noel smiled. Then we could keep the navigator scene. I guess. Arya wondered if the cons really had a spare navigator to crash. Probably. Noel nudged Mason Byers, who was paired up with James Freed. Dude, we're gonna have a navigator in our play. Nice, Mason said. Arya clamped her lips shut. Honestly, she didn't have the energy for this. Last night she hardly slept. Plagued by yesterday's cryptic text message, she'd spent half the night thinking and furiously knitting a purple hat with ear flaps. It was awful to think that someone knew not only about her and Ezra, but also about the stuff with her dad. What if this A person sent her mom's messages next? What if A already had? Arya didn't want her mom to find out, not now, and not that way. Arya also couldn't shake the idea that the A message actually might be from Allison. There just weren't that many people who knew. A few faculty members maybe, and Meredith knew, obviously, but they didn't know Arya. If the text was from Allison, that meant she was alive. Or not. What if the texts were from Allie's ghost? A ghost could have easily slid between the cracks of the women's bathroom at Snooker's, and spirits from the dead sometimes contracted the living to make amends, right? It was like their final homework assignment before graduating to heaven. If Allie needed to make amends, though, Arya could think of a more deserving candidate than her. Try Jenna. Arya put her hands over her eyes, blocking out the memory. Screw therapy that said you should face your demons. She tried to block out the Jenna thing as much as she tried to block out her dad and Meredith. Arya sighed. In times like this, she wished she hadn't drifted from her old friends. Like Hannah, a few desks over. If Arya could only walk up to Hannah and talk to her about this, ask her questions about Allie. But time really changed people. She wondered if it would be easier to talk to Spencer or Emily instead. Hey there. Arya straightened up. Ezra was standing in front of her desk. Hi, she squeaked. She met his blue eyes and her heart ached. Ezra tilted his hips awkwardly. How are you? I'm great. Really awesome. She sat up straight. On the plane back from Iceland, Arya had read in a 17 she found in her seat pocket that boys liked enthusiastic, positive girls. And since brilliance hadn't worked yesterday, why not try out preppy? Ezra clicked and unclicked his Bic pen. Listen, sorry to cut you off yesterday in the middle of your speech. Do you want me to give you your index cards so I can make them look like and grade you? So I can take a look at them and grade you? Okay. Huh. Would Ezra do that for the older students? So, how are you? Good, Ezra smiled. His lips twitched as if he wanted to say more. What are you working on there? He placed his hands on her desk and leaned over to look at her notebook. Arya stared at his hands for a moment and then slid her pinky finger up against his. She tried to make it look an accident, but he didn't pull away. It felt like electricity was surging between their two pinkies. Mr. Fritz! Devin Airless' hand shot up in the back row. I have a question. Be right there, Ezra said, straightening up. Arya put the pinky fingers she had touched Ezra's into her mouth. She watched him for a few seconds, thinking he might come back to her, but he didn't. Well then, back to plan J for jealous. She turned to Noel. I think our movie should have a sex scene in it, she said really loud, but Ezra was still bent over Devon's desk. Awesome, Noel said. Does the guy who thinks he's a duck get some? Yep, with a woman who kisses like a goose. Noel laughed. How does a goose kiss? Arya turned around Devon's desk. Ezra was facing them now. Good. Like this. She leaned over and smacked Noel's cheeks with her lips. Surprisingly, Noel smiled pretty good. Like Keel's Blue Eagle shaving cream. Nice, Noel whispered. The rest of the class burbled with activity, unaware of any goose kissing, but Ezra, still next to Devon's desk, stood absolutely still. So, did you know I'm having a party tonight? Noel put his hands on Arya's knee. Yeah, I heard something about that. You should totally come. We're going to have a lot of beer and other things, like scotch. Do you like scotch? My dad has a collection, so I love scotch. Arya felt Ezra's eyes burning into her back. Then she leaned over to Noel and said, I'll totally come to your party tonight. By the way his pen fell out of his hand and clattered to the ground, it wasn't so hard to guess whether or not Ezra had heard them.